AITA for exposing my mom's affair and refusing to stay silent like the rest of my family? I, 29 am a financial analyst for a corporate firm here in the Philadelphia suburbs, making about $92,000 a year. I'm not wealthy by any means, but I live comfortably. I've been with my fiancée, Olivia, 27F, a physical therapist, for 4 years. She also has a great career. We bought a townhouse together last year in Bucks County and are planning our wedding for next fall. My family always looked like the picture of suburban success. My dad, Frank, 60, owns a high-end landscaping business he built from scratch. He's a total workhorse, but it has certainly paid off for him. In a good year, he can clear $180,000. He's a true blue-collar success story, having started with a single lawnmower at 19 and now running a crew of 4 guys. My mom, Brenda, now 54, hasn't held a job in her entire adult life. She was a classic housewife, but not the type who bakes and cleans. She was the type who spent her days at the King of Prussia Mall, getting her nails done, and driving the Lexus RX 350 my dad leased for her. She always acted like she was doing my dad a colossal favor by managing the home, but in reality, our cleaning lady, Maria, did all the heavy lifting. I have 3 siblings, and we were always a tight-knit group. Kevin, 35, a union plumber who often gets referrals from dad's clients. He makes a solid living but has always been overly attached to our mom. Then there's Megan, 31, a middle school guidance counselor, married for 3 years to her college sweetheart, Steve. And finally, Sophie, 23, a recent communications grad from Penn State who is still figuring out her next move. Every Sunday, without fail, we would all convene at my parents' house for dinner. It was a tradition that lasted for more than 15 years. My mom would order catering from some overpriced bistro because, God forbid, she actually used the gourmet kitchen Dad had installed for her. We'd all sit around their enormous mahogany dining table, playing the part of the perfect American family. Looking back, the signs of trouble were all there. Mom was glued to her phone, constantly texting and smiling at the screen. She was always running errands that somehow took half the day. She had an endless list of excuses for not doing even the most basic household tasks. My dad would come home, caked in dirt and exhausted after a 10-hour day of physical labor, and she would immediately start complaining about how bored and unfulfilled she was. "Frank, you never take me anywhere special anymore," she'd lament, while wearing a $400 dress he'd bought her just last week. "I need some passion in my life. I'm still vibrant and attractive. I shouldn't be stuck in this house all day." My dad, bless his heart, would just nod and promise to book a cruise or buy her some new piece of jewelry. The man absolutely adored her, which makes what I'm about to tell you even more gut-wrenching. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me set the scene for the day our lives imploded. About 14 months ago, my mom was in the midst of planning her 53rd birthday party. It had to be an extravagant affair, of course. She'd been obsessing over it for weeks, probably spending close to $3,000 on a string quartet and gourmet appetizers alone. The entire extended family was invited, around 40 people in total. Sophie and I were tasked with bringing the cake and some extra decorations. We had coordinated a time to meet, but we got our signals crossed and arrived about 2 hours early. It wasn't a big deal. We figured we could help with the setup. We used the spare key we still had to let ourselves in. The house was eerily quiet. Mom's Lexus was in the driveway, but she was nowhere to be found downstairs. "Mom, we're here," Sophie called out, but her voice was met with silence. That's when we heard Ida's strange, rhythmic thumping from upstairs, followed by our mom's voice, but it was strained, different. Sophie clutched my arm, her eyes wide with confusion. "Maybe she's just moving boxes," I offered weakly, but we both knew that wasn't it. We crept up the stairs, our footsteps silent on the thick carpet. As we got closer, we heard a man's voice, a deep baritone. It definitely wasn't our dad's. My heart began to hammer against my ribs because I knew for a fact that Dad was on a big job site over in New Jersey. The master bedroom door was ajar, open by just a few inches. I wished to God I had turned around and walked away, but a morbid curiosity took over. What I saw next is seared into my brain for all eternity. There was my mother, completely naked, bent over the edge of the king-sized bed she shared with my father. And behind her was some muscular guy, probably in his early 30s, covered in tacky tribal tattoos, going at it. On the very bed I used to seek refuge in during thunderstorms when I was a kid. Sophie let out a small, horrified gasp, and their heads snapped in our direction. The guy, let's call him Derek, because he had the smarmy look of every Derek I've ever met, had the nerve to wink at us and continue for a few more thrusts before finally stopping. "Oh my God, what are you two doing here?" my mom shrieked, fumbling to cover her body with one of my dad's pillows. "This is not what it looks like." "But, lady," my eyes work just fine. Derek, standing there completely naked and utterly shameless, just started to laugh. "Whoa, Brenda, you didn't tell me your kids were such a buzzkill," he said, his eyes raking over Sophie in a way that made me want to rearrange his face. I'm 6'2" and played linebacker in high school, so I quickly stepped between him and my sister. "Get the hell out of my parents' house," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Easy, champ," Derek sneered. "Your mom invited me over. We're just having a little fun while the old man's at work." That's when the full weight of it hit me. This wasn't some one-time mistake. This guy was far too comfortable. He knew my dad's work schedule. He knew we wouldn't be there. This was a regular thing. "How long has this been going on?" I demanded, turning to my mom. She just sobbed and pleaded, "Please, don't tell your father. You don't understand. He doesn't pay attention to me anymore. I have needs," she wailed, but the tears were clearly for show. "I'll do anything. I'll give you money." Derek, meanwhile, was casually slipping on my dad's silk bathrobe as if it were his own and lighting a cigarette in their strictly smoke-free house. "Look, kids, your mom's a grown woman. She can do what she wants. Does Dad know about this?" Sophie asked, her voice a tiny whisper. She was only 22 at the time and still saw the world in black and white. "Of course not," Mom snapped. "And he's not going to, because you are not going to say a word." I pulled out my phone to call Dad, but Mom launched herself at me like a wild animal, knocking the phone from my grasp. "You can't. You'll ruin him. Think of the business, our reputation. What will the neighbors say?" But you could see it in her frantic eyes. She wasn't worried about Dad's heart or the family's well-being. She was worried about her cushy lifestyle, her credit cards, her Lexus. Derek finished getting dressed and had the audacity to hand me a business card. "Personal trainer at Apex Fitness. Hit me up if you ever want to get shredded, bro." And with that, he strolled out of the house as if he had just been over for coffee. In that moment, I knew my mother wasn't just a cheater. She was a stone-cold narcissist who cared for no one but herself. "How long?" I asked again, my voice flat. She was still crying, her expensive mascara creating black rivers down her cheeks. "It was just this one time. I swear it. That guy knew where Dad keeps his robes. He knew our schedules." "How long, Brenda?" I used her first name, and she flinched as if I'd struck her. "A few months," she whispered, her eyes cast down. "Try again. Maybe 8 months. But it's not serious. He means nothing to me." 8 months. For 8 months, while my father was out breaking his back to fund her life of leisure, she was sleeping with a 30-something personal trainer in their marital bed. "We're telling Dad," I stated. "You can't. It would destroy him. You should have thought about that before you became A." And that's when she slapped me. Hard, right across the cheek. "How dare you speak to your mother that way?" I stared at the woman who had given birth to me, the woman I had loved and respected for my entire life, and I felt nothing but a cold, bottomless disgust. "You're not my mother anymore," I said quietly. "A mother doesn't set fire to her own family for a cheap thrill." Sophie was crying silently in the corner. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, and we walked out, leaving our mom standing there in Dad's bathrobe, still trying to formulate a new lie. We waited for Dad on the front steps. I was conflicted about what to do, but Sophie made the decision for me. "He has to know," she said, her voice thick with tears. "If someone was doing that to me, I'd want to know the truth." Dad pulled into the driveway in his work truck about an hour later, covered in mulch and exhausted. He knew something was terribly wrong just by the looks on our faces. "What is it? Is everyone okay? How do you tell your father that his wife of 30 years is sleeping with a man young enough to be his son? There's no gentle way to do it. Dad, we need to talk to you about Mom." I will never forget the expression on his face as I recounted what we had seen. It was like watching the light go out inside someone. This strong, capable man who could design and build breathtaking landscapes just seemed to deflate. "Are you sure?" He kept asking, his voice cracking. Maybe you just misunderstood what you saw. But Sophie described the man in detail. She mentioned the robe, the cigarette. Dad's face grew paler with every word. Mom came downstairs an hour later to find the three of us sitting in stunned silence at the kitchen table. She immediately shifted into damage control mode. Frank, honey, I can explain. It was a terrible mistake. I was so lonely and confused. How long, Brenda? Dad asked, his voice barely a whisper. It was just this one time. I swear on my life, he means nothing to me. But her story kept shifting. First, it was once, then a few times, then maybe for a couple of months. Dad just sat there, absorbing it all. This woman was lying directly to his face, and he was still desperately searching for a way to absolve her. It's because I work too much. I can cut back my hours. We can take that trip to Italy you wanted. It's not your fault, honey. I just needed to feel desired again. You're always so exhausted when you get home. We never, you know. Even while confessing her betrayal, she was blaming him. The man worked 60-hour weeks to give her every single thing she ever wanted, and she was blaming him for her own infidelity. The next few weeks were a living hell. Dad barely spoke, picking at his food. He'd come home from work and just sit in his recliner, staring at the wall. Mom, on the other hand, went into full-blown manipulation mode. She cried constantly, swore it would never happen again, and promised she'd do anything to fix their marriage. But here's the thing. She never actually did anything. She didn't block Derek's number, she didn't cancel her membership at the gym where she met him, and she certainly didn't offer to get a job to help pay for marriage counseling. She just expected my dad to get over it because she said the words, "I'm sorry." And the most twisted part? Dad was actually considering it. She made a mistake, Matt, he told me a week later. People make mistakes. Marriage is about forgiveness. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk from the store, Dad. This was a choice she made every day for 8 months. But my dad was so shattered, so desperate to hold on to the illusion of his perfect family, that he was willing to sweep it all under the rug. That's when Mom started her campaign to win over my siblings. Within 2 weeks, she had completely rewritten history. Suddenly, she was the victim. Poor Brenda, trapped in a passionless marriage with a husband who was never emotionally available. I was just so lonely, she told anyone who would listen. Frank never talks to me, never compliments me. I was vulnerable, and this man took advantage of me. She played the victim card like a master violinist. She convinced Kevin that Dad was emotionally neglectful, and that's why she had sought comfort elsewhere. She convinced Megan that marriage is complicated, and sometimes good people mess up when they feel unloved. But the worst part was how she framed me and Sophie. They're just so angry and judgmental, she sobbed to Kevin over the phone. They want to tear our family apart over one little misstep. I think they're just jealous that a younger man still finds me attractive. Jealous of seeing our mother with some sleazy gym rat? What kind of sick logic is that? But it worked. Kevin started calling me, telling me I was being too harsh on Mom, that I needed to consider Dad's desire to keep the family together. Megan invited me out for coffee to try and mediate, as if I were the one who had done something wrong. The final straw came at what would be our last family dinner. Dad had lost about 25 pounds and looked like a ghost. Mom, however, showed up wearing a new designer dress and jewelry I knew for a fact they couldn't afford, especially with Dad's business suffering because of his depression. I think it's time for all of us to move past this unfortunate incident, Mom announced, as if she were leading a corporate meeting. Your father has forgiven me, and I expect my children to follow his lead. Family is about forgiveness and looking forward. I couldn't hold my tongue any longer. Forgiveness? Are you still seeing that guy? Dad, ask her about the charge from the Four Seasons last Tuesday. Dad's face turned crimson. How did you know about that? Because I pay attention. She is still cheating on you. I went to see him to end things for good. Mom screamed. I needed to tell him face to face that it was over. In a hotel room for 3 hours? You don't understand adult relationships, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Sometimes things are complicated. That's when I lost it. Complicated? You know what's not complicated? You're a liar and a cheater who is destroying this family because you're a selfish, entitled narcissist. Dad breaks his back for you, and this is how you repay him? By sleeping with every guy at the gym who looks at you twice. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. Then, Mom started her signature fake crying. I can't take this abuse anymore. To have my own son say such horrible things to me after everything I've sacrificed for this family. Sacrificed? This woman had never made a single sacrifice in her life. She had lived like a queen for 30 years on Dad's dime. But Kevin and Megan immediately rushed to her defense. You can't talk to Mom like that. Megan shouted. She made a mistake, but you're just being cruel. A mistake? She's been sleeping around for nearly a year. That's enough. Kevin boomed, standing up. I don't care what she did. She's still our mother. No, I said, standing up as well. She stopped being our mother the day she chose some fling over her husband and her children. I looked directly at Mom, who was still dabbing at her dry eyes. You are dead to me. Don't call me. Don't text me. And don't you dare show up at my door when you're old, broke, and alone. Remember this moment. Remember that you chose some random guy from the gym over your own family. I walked out of that house and didn't speak to any of them for the next 8 months. Olivia was a rock through it all. She fully supported my decision and never once tried to push me toward a reconciliation for my own peace of mind, or any of that nonsense. Your mom is a toxic narcissist, Matt, she said after I told her everything. You did the right thing by creating a boundary. We moved forward with our lives, planning our wedding and enjoying our new home. I was prepared to have a small wedding with only my chosen family, and I was at peace with that. But my mother wasn't finished trying to burn my life to the ground. Not by a long shot. A few months after I went no contact, strange things began to happen. Olivia received a Facebook message from a fake profile alleging I was cheating on her with a coworker. The only problem was the coworker in question was a 60-year-old grandmother in the payroll department. Some woman sent me these supposed text messages between you and her, Olivia told me, showing me the poorly fabricated screenshots. The formatting is all wrong, and it sounds nothing like you. Then, my director at work received an anonymous email claiming I was engaging in insider trading. It was completely baseless, but it still triggered a stressful internal review where I had to defend my integrity. My credit score took a sudden hit because someone was attempting to open credit cards in my name. My car was keyed in my office parking garage. Olivia's tires were slashed while she was at work at the clinic. At first, I chalked it up to a string of terrible luck, but the pattern was undeniable. Someone was methodically trying to dismantle our lives. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when my cousin, Mark, called me. He had remained neutral throughout the family implosion, but he couldn't stay silent after what he'd overheard. Dude, your mom was at Kevin's house last week, bragging about how she was going to teach you a lesson. She said you needed to learn what happens when you disrespect family. She was laughing, man, laughing while she talked about all the stuff she was doing to ruin your life. Mark told me that Mom had been boasting about hiring some guy she found on a sketchy website to create the fake profiles and send the messages to Olivia. She admitted to making the anonymous call to my firm. It was then I realized Brenda wasn't just a cheating housewife. She was a vindictive sociopath, fundamentally incapable of accepting responsibility for her own actions. She also said something about your dad not knowing the extent of the credit card debt, Mark added, and that if he doesn't start defending her more, she's going to teach him a lesson, too. Credit card debt? What credit card debt? The pieces started to click. Mom's new designer clothes, the expensive jewelry, the hotel charges Dad had found. She wasn't just cheating. She was embezzling family money to finance her affairs. Most guys would probably pack up and move to another state. But I'm not most guys. If my mother wanted to play dirty, I was about to show her what real consequences looked like. Instead of some elaborate revenge scheme, I decided to just let her continue digging her own grave. Because when you're a narcissistic cheater who burns every bridge, you eventually find yourself on an island of your own making. I started with Mark, asking him to just keep his ears open. It turned out Mom couldn't stop talking. She told anyone who would listen how ungrateful I was and how her marriage was basically over anyway. But the more she complained, the more people started to notice the inconsistencies. Why was she spending 4 hours at the gym every day if she was so depressed? Why was she always dressed to the nines just to go to the grocery store? Why was she constantly flaunting new things if she claimed Frank never bought her anything? Mark told me that Kevin's wife, Michelle, was starting to grow wary. Mom had been openly flirting with Michelle's brother and several of the other husbands at Megan's school events. The word was spreading. Brenda was acting like a single woman, despite still being very much married. Meanwhile, Dad finally started paying attention to the finances. When you run your own business, you get a keen sense of cash flow, and things weren't adding up. He discovered statements for credit cards he never even knew existed all in her name, but tied to the business account as a secondary user. The statements were a roadmap of her deceit. Charges for boutique hotels, lavish dinners for two, jewelry, and spa packages. She told me they were for client networking, Dad told Mark at a cookout. But when I called the hotel, they confirmed she was always checked in with various younger men. Dad began a deep dive into the company's books. He had given Mom access to the business credit card for legitimate expenses like office supplies and gas for her car. But as he scrolled through years of statements, he found thousands of dollars in fraudulent charges. Extravagant dinners at romantic city restaurants when she was supposedly at Staples. Hotel rooms booked on Tuesday afternoons. Purchases from high-end men's clothing stores and gym memberships for people who were not his employees. It took him a few weeks to tally it all up, but the pattern was undeniable. She had been systematically siphoning money from the business to fund her double life for over a year. The individual charges were small enough to go unnoticed, but they added up to thousands of dollars every single month. When Dad finally confronted her with a stack of printed statements, Brenda's mask of victimhood shattered. "So what if I spend a little money? I've been miserable for years. I deserve to have some fun," she shrieked. "You think working all the time makes you a good husband? I'm still young and beautiful, and I deserve to be happy. Not a single shred of remorse. Not one word of apology. Just pure, unadulterated rage at being caught." Dad filed for divorce the next day. The proceedings were ugly. Pennsylvania is an equitable distribution state, which means assets aren't just split 50-50ths, they're divided fairly. And when one party has committed marital fraud and embezzled from a family business, the definition of fair changes dramatically. Dad's lawyer successfully proved that Mom had embezzled approximately $45,000 from the business over an 18-month period. Money that should have gone toward employee holiday bonuses, new equipment, and savings was instead used to entertain her boy toys. The judge did not take the theft lightly. Mom was ordered to repay what she had stolen, which meant the court forced the sale of their home and the liquidation of most of her valuable assets to pay Dad back. She got to keep her Lexus, but she couldn't afford the lease payments or the insurance once the divorce was finalized. She received no significant alimony, as the court ruled she was perfectly capable of working and that her fraud had actively damaged the marital estate she was trying to claim. All her boyfriends vanished the moment the money dried up. It turns out, men in their early 30s aren't particularly interested in a 50-something woman with no job, no money, and a reputation for betrayal. But the real show was watching her try to manipulate Kevin and Megan into bankrolling her. "I need help with my apartment deposit," she'd cry to them. "Your father has left me with absolutely nothing. Maybe you should get a job, Mom," Megan finally told her after she'd asked for a handout for the third consecutive month. "I'm 54 years old. Who is going to hire me? I have no skills." Well, it turns out that when you're desperate enough, you find a way. She eventually landed a job at a local giant supermarket part-time for $14 an hour, but it was a job. The store manager took pity on her, but it was a harsh reality for a woman who had spent 30 years living like a pampered princess. She tried moving in with Kevin, but his wife kicked her out after 2 weeks because Mom kept borrowing her jewelry and making inappropriate comments to their neighbors. Megan let her stay for a month, but that arrangement ended abruptly when Mom was caught using her credit card to order expensive anti-aging creams online. Her well of sympathy had run dry. The woman who was once the queen bee of every family gathering was now an outcast. Meanwhile, my life was thriving. Olivia and I had a beautiful wedding in a small, intimate ceremony. My mother was not invited. I was promoted to senior financial analyst with a $15,000 raise. We sold our townhouse and bought a larger home in a great school district. We were trying for a baby. I hadn't even thought about my mother in months when Kevin called me out of the blue. "Matt, Mom is in a really bad way. She's living in this rundown apartment complex over by the highway, working the checkout at Giant. She keeps asking about you." "Good for her," I said flatly. "Maybe she's finally learning what it's like to be an adult." "Come on, man. That's your mother. She's lost so much weight. She looks sick." Don't you feel sorry for her at all? Yeah, I feel satisfaction. She made her bed. She says she's sorry, that she wants to make it right. Then she knows my number. But the calls kept coming. From Kevin, from Megan, from distant aunts and uncles I barely spoke to. Suddenly, everyone was an advocate for my mother now that she was broke and pathetic. The call I was actually waiting for finally came on a random Thursday afternoon. An unknown number, but I recognized the area code. What do you want? I answered. Honey, please, it's me. Her voice was thin and reedy, a ghost of the confident, demanding woman she used to be. I know I messed up so badly, but I need your help. I can't make rent this month. My landlord is going to evict me. Sounds like a you problem. Please. I haven't eaten a real meal in 3 days. I'm working at a grocery store for $14 an hour. I'm your mother. You stopped being my mother when you were screwing random men in my father's bed. Remember Derek? How's that working out for you? She began to cry. An ugly, gasping sob, probably the first genuine one she'd had in years. I was wrong. I made a catastrophic mistake. I've lost everything. Your father won't speak to me. You kids barely help me. I have no one. That's because you're a selfish monster who torched her own life. Actions have consequences. I'll do anything. I'll get on my knees and beg. I'll tell everyone how sorry I am. Please, I just need a little money to get back on my feet. I was about to hang up, but a part of me perversely wanted to hear her grovel. How much do you need? I asked. Just $2,000. I know you're doing well for yourself now. Please, I promise I'll pay you back. I actually laughed out loud. Brenda, you have never paid for anything in your entire life. You couldn't even stay faithful to the man who gave you a palace. I made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. Sleeping with multiple men for years while embezzling $45,000 from your husband's business isn't a mistake. It's a character flaw. Please. I'm so unhappy. I'm sleeping on an air mattress on the floor. My neighbors are all drug addicts. I'm scared all the time. My manager at work keeps trying to touch me when I ask him to fix the broken register. Sounds like you're finally getting a taste of the real world, instead of the fantasy life Dad paid for. I was spoiled. You're right, I was. But I've learned my lesson. I see what I lost now. Do you? Do you really? Because from where I stand, you lost a man who worshipped you, children who loved you, and a lifestyle that most people can only dream of. And you threw it all away because you were bored. I know. I know I was a fool, but I can't change what I did. I need help now. Look, Brenda, here's the truth. I could help you. I earn enough that $2,000 wouldn't even register. Olivia and I could support you for the rest of your life if we wanted to. Then why won't you? I'm begging you. Because you deserve this. You deserve to work a minimum wage job at 54. You deserve to live in a miserable apartment in a bad neighborhood. You deserve to feel what it's like when the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally finally give up. That's so cruel. Is it? Is it crueler than what you did to Dad? Crueler than trying to get me fired and ruin my relationship with Olivia? Crueler than stealing from the business that fed your own family? Silence on the other end of the line. You made your bed, Brenda. Now lie in it. I hung up and blocked the number. For the next week, she tried calling from different phones, leaving desperate voicemails, begging and crying. I saved them all. Sometimes, when I'm having a stressful day, I listen to one and remind myself that no matter how bad things get, at least I'm not a 54-year-old woman learning for the first time that actions have consequences. The last I heard from Mark was about 6 months ago. Mom had been evicted and was staying at a women's shelter downtown. Apparently, she tells everyone there that her cruel, ungrateful son is rich and could help her, but chooses not to. And you know what? She's absolutely right. I could help her. But why in the world would I? Dad is doing wonderfully. He married a lovely woman named Susan, a 49-year-old dental hygienist who treats him like a king. She genuinely appreciates having a decent, hard-working man. Dad looks 10 years younger and happier than I have ever seen him. Olivia and I just found out we're having a baby boy in September. We're going to name him Frank, after my father. Life is good when you remove toxic people from it, even if they share your DNA. Some people need to hit rock bottom and stay there until they learn to climb out on their own. The best revenge isn't some complex plot. It's living well while you watch someone self-destruct from the consequences of their own choices. My mother thought she could lie, cheat, steal, and manipulate her way through life without any repercussions. It turns out that strategy only works for so long. And now she knows exactly what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. Thanks for all the support in the comments. Some people say I should still help her because she's family. To those people, I say this: family doesn't steal from you. Family doesn't try to destroy your happiness. Family doesn't choose a stranger over you. Blood doesn't make you family. Loyalty and respect do. And her actions showed me exactly who she is. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.